The clay pot inside your furnace is still glowing. It holds molten glass, the most valuable material in the workshop. But the pot cannot be lifted out and carried across the lagoon. The furnace around it is masonry. The timber beside it has already been paid for. On a shelf are orders for bottles, drinking vessels, and window glass that merchants expect before the next sailing season. Then the order arrives. The glass furnaces of Venice are to be removed from the city and concentrated on Murano. You are not being forbidden to make glass. Your tools are not being confiscated. Your customers have not disappeared. The government has changed only one thing: where the fire may burn. But that single change threatens everything connected to it. Production must stop. A new site must be secured. A furnace must be rebuilt. Fuel, ash, sand, cullet, tools, and finished stock must cross the water. Your masters must agree to follow. During the interruption, sales fall to zero, while obligations continue. Move too slowly, and the law may close you. Move too quickly, and the relocation may consume the cash needed to restart. The question is not whether Venetian glass survives, it is whether your Glassworks survives, the policy that will eventually make Venetian glass famous. Return to Venice in 1290, the last full year before the decree. The central figure in this reconstruction is not a modern factory owner. He is a composite furnace patron. A man with capital tied to a glass furnace, working rights inside the regulated craft, obligations to masters and laborers, and commercial relationships with merchants. He may own some tools and stock while renting or sharing the site. He may be a skilled glassworker himself, or a patron who organizes production through skilled masters. What matters is that his income depends on keeping one furnace campaign alive, from raw material to finished sale. Venetian glassmaking is already organized. The craft statutes of the Fiolari, the makers of flasks and other hollow glass, were formally recorded in 1271. Murano already contains glass workers and furnaces before 1291. Venice is not inventing an industry on an empty island. It is trying to concentrate an existing, dispersed one. The business is attractive for a clear reason. Venice is a commercial machine. Ships and merchants connect the lagoon to the eastern Mediterranean, northern Italy, and markets beyond the Alps. The city needs ordinary containers, lamps, table vessels, and window glass. It can also import high-quality plant ash, raw glass, and other materials from the Levant, then turn them into products worth far more than their ingredients. On paper, location is your greatest advantage. You are close to merchants, warehouses, customers, courts, and credit. That is also the weakness. Your furnace sits inside a dense wooden city whose government can decide that the fire, smoke, fuel piles, and industrial traffic no longer belong there. The same location that creates demand gives the state the power and the incentive to remove you. By the end, we will test 4 questions. What a furnace patron actually controlled, what a good production year might leave after costs, how the 1291 order could break the cash cycle, and whether relocation to Murano destroyed the business or selected the businesses strong enough to dominate later. Begin with the asset that seems most obvious, the furnace. It is not a portable machine. It is a built environment of brick, clay, chambers, working openings, flues, and pots. The 1271 craft rules refer to furnace patrons and regulate the number of working mouths. That does not give us a complete architectural plan for every workshop, but it confirms that productive capacity was measured through the furnace's structure, not merely through the number of men standing beside it. The patron's movable equipment is valuable but incomplete. There are blowpipes and iron tools, shears, pontils, molds, benches, storage vessels, scales, and perhaps grinding equipment. There are clay pots or crucibles that must endure repeated heating. There is cullet, broken glass that can be remelted and prepared batch waiting for the next firing. There may be finished goods in the warehouse, but chipped or cracked pieces cannot simply be passed off as sound merchandise. The statutes impose a penalty for selling damaged glass. Then there is fuel. Venice has no forest beside the workshop. Wood must arrive by boat, in large volume, dry enough to burn efficiently. The guild rules restricted furnace fuel to specified woods, especially alder and willow, while domestic firewood was controlled separately. Alder grew in wet river environments and was accessible through the mainland waterways, but accessibility did not make it free. Someone had to cut it, dry it, load it, transport it, unload it, store it, and protect it from moisture. The raw glass mixture creates a second supply chain. Silica can come from sand or crushed stone. The flux that lowers its melting point comes from plant ash. Evidence indicates that Venetian makers were importing high-quality plant ash from Syria and Egypt by the late 13th century. Other materials altered color and clarity. Cullet reduced the amount of fresh batch required, but only if it was clean and compatible. None of this produces revenue without labor. A master glass worker controls heat, timing, viscosity and form through trained judgment. A disciple or apprentice is not instantly interchangeable with him. Laborers feed the furnace, move materials, and support the working team. The statutes describe obligations between patrons, masters, disciples and workers, and the editorial evidence shows that furnaces could operate through day and night shifts during the working season. The patron therefore controls a bundle: access to a site, a legal place inside the craft, furnace capacity, tools, inventory, credit, and a team. Remove one element and the others lose value. The first major surprise is how clearly the statutes reveal competition for that bundle. Every operating furnace owed 4 silver grossi as a due to the doge. A patron who improperly enticed away another master, disciple or laborer faced a fine of 5 Venetian lire. 5 lire equaled 100 soldi, the same scale at which unsecured craft credit required an adequate pledge under another rule. The law treated labor poaching and unsecured exposure as serious threats because both could destabilize a furnace. That changes the picture. The rarest asset is not the blowpipe. It is the coordinated team around the heat, and that asset can walk away. A normal production year begins before the first finished vessel is sold. The patron must assemble wood, raw materials, replacement pots, and working capital. He must secure labor and settle advances. He may receive money from a merchant, borrow against property or inventory, enter a partnership arrangement, or sell on credit. Medieval Venetian finance is sophisticated, but a glass workshop is still exposed to the oldest cash flow problem in business. Expenses arrive before customers pay. Revenue comes from volume, variety, and timing. Common hollow wares matter more than the later legend of jewel-like luxury glass suggests. Bottles, flasks, beakers, jugs, lamps, and other utilitarian vessels create repeat demand. Window glass forms another important line, although specialist window glass workers developed their own organization. A patron may also produce higher quality decorated vessels, but in 1290 the industry has not yet reached the 15th century age of cristallo. The profitable workshop is not a gallery, it is a production system serving households, churches, merchants, and builders. Some orders are safer than others. A merchant who buys a batch of standard vessels can move them through a broad network. A custom order may command a better price, but creates rejection risk. Thin glass saves material, but increases breakage. Thick glass survives transport, but consumes more batch and fuel. A clearer melt may sell better, yet it demands cleaner inputs and tighter control of heat. Seasonality matters because the furnace does not operate as a modern plant with identical monthly output. The working calendar was regulated, and later amendments preserve evidence of a defined furnace season followed by the drawing of the fire in summer. During operation, the furnace demands attention day and night. During closure, repairs can be made and pots replaced, but revenue from fresh production stops. No representative annual furnace account for 1290 has been identified in the sources used here, so any profit figure must be reconstructed rather than quoted. A useful stress test is to imagine 100 units of cash actually collected from sales, not 100 lira, simply 100 accounting units. In a defensible Goodyear model, perhaps 45 to 55 units disappear into fuel, batch materials, transport, breakage, and packaging. Another 20 to 30 support masters, assistants, labourers, food allowances, and advances. Rent or site payments, guild and public dues, repairs, tools, finance costs, and bad debts may absorb another 10 to 15. That leaves perhaps 5 to 15 units before the patron fully compensates his own labour, supports his household, or replaces major capital. Those ranges are illustrative, not archival. Their purpose is to show the business logic. A furnace can generate impressive sales while retaining a narrow cash margin. The difference between profit and cash is even more dangerous. Suppose finished glass, worth 20 units, has been delivered, but payment is due later. The ledger records a claim. The wood merchant still wants money. The labour force still needs support. A cracked batch cannot pay a creditor, and a merchant's promise cannot be burned in the furnace. The statutes themselves recognize that credit can destabilize the trade. They restrict large unsecured advances connected to glasswork, unless a suitable pledge exists, while allowing credit in unworked glass. That distinction makes economic sense. Material can serve as collateral. Skill and future output cannot be seized so easily. A successful patron, therefore, appears prosperous, because the furnace turns cheap-looking ingredients into valuable objects. But the apparent margin depends on three conditions. The fire must keep producing, the workers must stay coordinated, and the gap between paying suppliers and collecting customers must remain manageable. In an ordinary year, those conditions reinforce one another. Reliable output attracts merchants. Merchant orders support credit. Credit buys fuel. Fuel keeps masters employed. Skilled masters reduce waste and protect quality. The business looks stable because the cycle is already moving. The relocation order attacks the cycle at its most expensive point, the moment it must stop. A glassworks appears to sell glass. Economically, it sells continuity. The furnace converts material only when heat, labor, timing, and orders arrive in the right sequence. A pile of plant ash has little value without silica, pots, fuel, and a working furnace. A master's skill earns nothing if the furnace is cold. A merchant contract becomes a liability if production misses the delivery window. Even a legally secure workshop can fail if it cannot finance the interval between one campaign and the next. This is the hidden dependency, synchronized access. Venice provides that synchronization through density. A patron can reach merchants, boatmen, creditors, officials, builders, and skilled workers within the same urban system. The workshop's location reduces transaction costs that never appear as a separate line in the ledger. Information travels quickly. A missing material can be sourced. A buyer can inspect goods. A dispute can be taken before the craft or public authorities. A master can be found, although the rules against poaching show how fiercely patrons competed for him. The government's order seems to destroy this advantage by removing the furnace from the commercial center. But the calculation changes when Murano is understood correctly. Murano is not exile into isolation, it is close to Venice, connected by the lagoon, and already inhabited by glassworkers. Its church calendar appears in the craft statutes before 1291. Existing furnaces mean that some fuel routes, skilled labor, repair knowledge, and commercial practices are already present. Moving there is still costly, but it is not the same as building an industry in a field. This produces the midpoint reversal. Before the decree, the furnace patron believes his business depends on proximity to customers. After the decree, it becomes clear that his deeper advantage may come from proximity to other producers. A cluster can lower some costs while raising others. Masters are easier to find, but competitors can hire them. Suppliers can serve many furnaces, but they gain bargaining power. Merchants know where to buy glass, but they can compare workshops more easily. Officials can inspect the industry more efficiently, but that also makes enforcement faster. Knowledge circulates, yet the state can try to stop it from leaving the lagoon. The business is not merely being relocated, it is being reorganized into a market that is denser, more visible, and more controllable. For the industry, that may be an advantage. For an individual patron with limited cash, it can be fatal, because the value created by concentration arrives later. The cost of moving arrives now. On November 8, 1291, the Great Council adopted the measure associated with concentrating glass furnaces on Murano. Fire safety is the most widely attested immediate rationale. Dense urban construction, stored fuel, and furnaces create an obvious public hazard. Historians have also connected the policy to easier supervision of a valuable craft, but the precise balance of motives cannot be proved from a simple slogan. For the patron, motive matters less than sequence. The first loss is the unfinished furnace campaign. A furnace cannot be moved while operating. The current batch must be worked off, abandoned, or allowed to cool. Finished pieces must be annealed so they do not shatter from internal stress. Pots and furnace fabric may be damaged during cooling or dismantling. Iron tools can travel, masonry usually cannot. Much of what looked like a fixed asset becomes demolition waste. The second loss is contractual. Orders already accepted do not disappear because the state changes industrial geography. A merchant may tolerate delay if Venetian glass is difficult to replace. He may also redirect the order to a patron already established on Murano. The customer's demand survives. Your claim on that demand does not. The third loss is inventory value. Fuel is bulky. Raw materials are heavy. Finished glass is fragile. Every additional loading and unloading creates breakage, theft, and handling costs. Wood stored near the Venetian workshop may have been delivered under an arrangement tied to that site. Moving it requires boats, labor, and dry storage on the island. If rain or lagoon water damages the fuel, the furnace consumes more volume to produce less heat. The fourth loss is time. A new site needs legal acceptance, access to a landing place, storage, working space, and furnace construction. If many patrons must move within the same period, demand rises for masons, clay, bricks, transport, and suitable property. The decree does not merely impose a private cost. It creates a temporary market in which every displaced furnace patron is buying similar things at once. Then labor turns from an expense into a survival risk. A master attached to your Venetian furnace may follow you. He may also prefer an existing Murano patron whose furnace is already hot. Even where formal obligations exist, enforcement takes time, and a skilled man cannot be replaced by an untrained laborer without increasing failed batches. The old rule against enticing another patron's workers now makes sense as an anti-collapse mechanism. 5 lire is not a symbolic penalty. It is an attempt to stop one furnace from saving itself by stripping another. The obvious response is to pay advances and secure loyalty. That creates another problem. Advances consume the cash needed for construction. They may bind the worker, but they also convert future production into present debt. Later rules would cap excessive advances to masters and laborers, evidence that competition for skilled hands could become financially destructive. Now the credit chain tightens. The supplier who financed plant ash or fuel expected repayment from sales. The patron expected those sales from a working furnace. The merchant expected delivery before paying the balance. Once production stops, each party waits for someone else to absorb the delay. There is no modern limited liability company protecting the patron. Obligations may be personal, secured by pledges, shared through partnerships, or enforced through craft and public courts. Finished stock can be sold at a discount. Tools can be pledged. A share in the rebuilt furnace can be surrendered to a financier or another patron. Survival may require giving away the future profit that justified moving in the first place. Then demand changes shape. Venice still needs glass, but the furnace is now separated from some direct customers. A merchant with boats and warehouse access becomes more important. He can collect goods from Murano and distribute them in the city or abroad. That preserves sales volume while shifting bargaining power toward the intermediary. The industry may continue producing, yet the patron's margin can shrink. Resistance appears cheaper. Keep the furnace in Venice, continue taking orders, and wait to see how strictly the decree is enforced. This strategy preserves cash only while enforcement remains uncertain. It also makes new investment irrational. Why repair a furnace that may be ordered down? Why extend credit to a patron whose site may become illegal? Why should a master remain when Murano offers lawful work? Even before an official closes the furnace, uncertainty can freeze the business around it. Enforcement was not necessarily instantaneous or perfectly uniform. Historical evidence warns against imagining every Venetian furnace dismantled on the same morning. Repeated regulation and later traces of production outside the preferred zone suggest a longer process. That does not make the shock smaller. It makes it more financially corrosive. A clear confiscation creates one loss. An uncertain transition creates months in which the patron pays to preserve two possibilities: maintain the old operation while preparing a new one. By 1295, the glassworkers' own petition would reveal what the struggle had become. Venetian craftsmen complained that workers were leaving to serve furnaces in mainland cities, and that materials from Venice helped those competitors operate. The crisis was no longer only about where a furnace stood. It was about whether Venice could keep the entire production system inside its control. The patron has four realistic choices, and none preserves everything. The first is delay. He can continue in Venice as long as enforcement permits, finish outstanding orders, collect receivables, and build a larger cash reserve before moving. This protects liquidity and may reduce the amount of inventory transported. It also leaves him exposed to sudden closure. Customers may avoid signing new contracts. Skilled workers may leave first. A strategy designed to buy time can destroy the confidence that gives the business time. The second is an independent move. This preserves ownership and future margin.
The patron secures a Murano site, rebuilds the furnace, transports stock, and tries to keep the team together. It is the cleanest strategic answer and the most demanding financial one. He must fund demolition, transport, construction, labor retention, and household needs while receiving little or no production income. The obvious solution, therefore, fails for many small patrons. The business may be profitable after reopening and still run out of cash before the first sale. The third choice is consolidation. Two patrons can share a site, combine capital, lease capacity, or place production under one operating furnace. This reduces duplicated construction and may restart output sooner. It also divides control. Who receives the best working hours? Whose merchant order takes priority? Who bears the loss from a spoiled batch? Which patron owns the finished stock when raw materials and labor have been mixed? The statute's concern with partnership credit, pledges, furnace capacity, and labor obligations shows why consolidation is not merely friendly cooperation. It moves risk from the furnace wall into the contract. The fourth choice is exit. A patron can sell tools and stock, assign contracts, become a merchant, work as a master under someone else, or invest in another furnace rather than rebuild his own. This may protect part of his wealth, but forced sales occur in a buyer's market. Many patrons are trying to dispose of similar assets. The masonry has little resale value. The most valuable asset, the team, does not belong to him in the way a tool does. At this point, the expected verdict seems obvious. The decree favors existing Murano furnaces and destroys displaced independents. Then the evidence from 1295 changes the forecast. The guild's officials and craftsmen petitioned the Venetian government because glassworkers were leaving to work elsewhere. They named furnaces in Treviso, Vicenza, Padua, Mantua, Ferrara, Ravenna, Ancona, and Bologna. They argued that Venetian business was being lost and asked for severe penalties against emigrating craftsmen and restrictions on exporting materials needed by rival furnaces. This is more than a rule about secrets. It is evidence of an expanding competitive market. Venice was not protecting a craft that had nowhere else to go. It was trying to prevent a mobile technology from creating competing centers across northern and central Italy. The 1271 statutes had already restricted unauthorized departure and barred outsiders from owning or directing glass production within the Venetian district. The later petition sought to strengthen the wall in both directions, keep skilled people in and keep strategic materials from going out. Now the relocation to Murano looks different. Concentration lowers the state's cost of monitoring furnaces and workers. It gives merchants a recognizable production district. It allows suppliers, repairers, and labor to gather around repeated demand. It makes quality rules and craft discipline easier to enforce. Most importantly, it turns proximity among producers into a collective commercial identity that outside competitors cannot reproduce simply by hiring one master. The decree therefore creates a second kind of asset, membership in a protected cluster. That asset does not compensate every displaced patron. It rewards those who can survive the transition, secure a site, retain skilled labor, and operate inside the new concentration. A cash-rich patron may buy tools from a failed rival, hire workers released by a closed furnace, or enter a partnership on favorable terms. The crisis reduces the number of independent balance sheets while preserving, and perhaps strengthening, the productive system. The state protects the industry. It does not promise to protect each investor in it. So, can your Glassworks survive? Begin with the best defensible case. You have cash reserves not tied entirely to inventory. Your merchant customers accept delayed delivery. You secure a Murano site quickly, perhaps through an existing relationship. Your master and core workers follow. You salvage the movable tools, sell or use the remaining Venetian stock, and rebuild before losing an entire production season. In that case, the relocation year is unlikely to be a profitable year. Construction, transport, duplicated storage, breakage, and downtime absorb the normal surplus. But the business can survive. Once production resumes, Murano's concentration may reduce search costs, improve access to specialized labor and suppliers, and place you inside the district merchants increasingly associate with Venetian glass. Now take the likely case for a smaller, independent patron. His apparent wealth is trapped in furnace fabric, raw materials, receivables, and obligations. He can finance either the move or the continuity of his team, but not both comfortably. Delay weakens customer confidence. Moving immediately empties the cash box. He therefore merges with another furnace, accepts a financier, leases working capacity, or becomes a subordinate partner. The productive activity survives, the independent business does not. Finally, the failure case. The patron has debt secured on stock or property, long-dated customer payments, and no guaranteed Murano site. His master leaves for an operating furnace. Fuel is sold at a discount. Finished goods break or are liquidated cheaply. The old furnace cannot legally justify new investment, while the new one cannot be financed. Creditors take the remaining movable value, and another patron acquires the labor or tools. The order has not destroyed glassmaking. It has transferred assets from a weak balance sheet to a stronger one. Using the illustrative Goodyear model, the patron once retained perhaps 5 to 15 units from every 100 units of collected sales after operating costs. A relocation can easily consume several years of such residual margin because it combines capital expenditure with lost revenue. Even without a precise medieval construction account, the economic conclusion is firm. A workshop earning a narrow annual surplus cannot absorb a full shutdown and rebuild unless it has accumulated cash, outside credit, or a partner willing to bear the interruption. Therefore, the answer depends on what survive means. Can the furnace remain profitable while moving? Probably not. Can the same patron reopen on Murano? Yes, if he has liquidity, labor loyalty, and rapid access to a site. Can a typical undercapitalized patron preserve full independence? Much less likely. Consolidation or loss of control is the more defensible outcome. Can the Venetian glass industry emerge stronger? Yes. The long-run gains of concentration, specialized labor, supplier density, commercial reputation, regulation, and protection against outsiders can exceed the private losses imposed during transition. The winners are established Murano operators, well-capitalized patrons, merchants with transport and credit, and the Venetian state, which gains both fire separation and easier supervision. The losses fall first on displaced patrons with little cash, then on workers during downtime, suppliers waiting for payment, and creditors holding weak pledges. Customers may pay more or wait longer in the transition, but demand itself remains. Return to the glowing clay pot from the beginning. At first it looked like the business's most valuable asset, molten glass, ready to become saleable goods. After the decree, its meaning changes. It is valuable only because a furnace, a master, fuel, raw materials, credit, transport, law, and customers are synchronized around it. When that system is broken, the glass cools into inventory. When the system is rebuilt on Murano, the same material becomes the foundation of a protected industrial district. Your workshop can survive, but probably not unchanged, not profitably in the relocation year, and not merely because the glass is good. It survives only if the owner can finance the gap between the place the law has ended and the cluster the law is creating. The glass survived. The old balance sheet did not.